On today's Locked On Giants podcast, we chat with Pro Football Hall of Fame voter Charean Williams of NBC Sports and Pro Football Talk as we put a bow on the Eli Manning Hall of Fame debate for the year. That's coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet win. Go to FanDuel.com to get started. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all our written work. And as always, welcome on into our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's show, I'm pleased to welcome in first-time visitor here on the show. Hopefully it won't be the last time, because this is a lady I have a ton of respect for and I look up to. She is Charean Williams. She is with NBC Sports Pro Football Talk, and she is also a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame voting committee. So she is here to talk a little bit about the Eli Manning decision, the one that has a lot of Giant fans upset, but a lot of things at play here, Charean, as far as, the changes and the philosophy, the new rules. And I think we need to start there if we could. Much has been made about the new rules for the voting and everything like that. So can you give us a little bit of background as to maybe how that might have played into this whole process?
Well, I think people were taken surprise by the number of guys who got in, only 3 modern era guys and 1 off the coach, contributor, and seniors. Of those 5, only 1 of those got in. And so I think people were a little taken aback by the fact that most of these classes had been 7 inductees or 8 in some years, and that this one is only 4. And didn't realize that the rules had changed. And I kept stressing this is not going to be a yes or no vote. This is not going to be easy for these guys to get in. They listened to Deion Sanders. They listened to other Hall of Famers who wanted smaller classes. They wanted to make it even more exclusive than what it is. And they have done that with this. They accomplished exactly what they set out to do by changing the rules. In the past, for instance, on the modern era, you had 5 candidates, 5 finalists, and you voted yes or no. And most times, everybody voted yes on those. So you had 5 modern era guys who got in every single year. This year we have 3. Coach and contributor, you voted yes or no, up or down on that. They got in. Mike Holmgren this year didn't get in, which is, to me, the biggest surprise off this slate of guys is that Mike Holmgren didn't get in. I'm also on the coaches subcommittee. So very surprised that he didn't get in, but he didn't. And they just made it way harder, and this is what they want. And I do wonder with this class, I just don't know how much intrigue, how much interest there is going to be in this class when they all deserve it. Jared Allen, Eric Allen, Sterling Sharp, Antonio Gates. But just considering how long it's been since Eric Allen and Sterling Sharp played, the fact that some of these guys played for small market teams. Antonio Gates played for a team that in a city that doesn't even have a team anymore. So I'm just curious what the interest is going to be, how big the crowd's going to be, and does that start to factor in into future years when the Hall of Fame's saying we're getting nobody here, and Canton's struggling because they expect this weekend to make all their money and they're not selling out hotels. And I think that very well could be the case in August. Now, when Tom Brady goes in, is it going to be a full house? Absolutely no question about that. And that's the thing. When you get a quarterback in there, you're going to get a full house. You're going to have a lot of interest. And I just don't know with this class that you're going to have that. You do have the 2 offensive players in Sterling Sharp and Antonio Gates, but they played so long ago. I just don't know if there's going to be that interest.
Charean, is there a danger that this new setup, if you will, will create a backlog, or has the backlog already kind of been?
There has been a backlog, and I think that's one reason that Eric Allen got in is because he was in his last year, and the plea was made that this is his last year. Like, if he gets in that senior abyss, like, it may be years before he comes back up for a vote, and that's kind of what it's been. Once you fall into that senior category, it's hard to get back and have a chance to get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So this is going to make, you're right, it's going to be an even bigger backlog. And you look at the receiver position, the backlog that we've kind of had with those guys, that they finally got in Andre Johnson, but they can't seem to take that next step. And those guys are just back. Everybody has their favorite, and people, frankly, aren't going to vote for 2 or 3 receivers at a time in a year. And so we've kind of gotten that backlog. And then you look at, okay, Larry Fitzgerald's eligible next year. Are you going to vote for Larry Fitzgerald and another receiver? Maybe not, I always say that you vote for the best candidates there, regardless of position, regardless of the years that they're in. And another point I'll make, and this relates to Eli, is I think selectors have become way more selective in first ballot Hall of Famers. I think they've said we've let in too many guys who aren't first ballot Hall of Famers, and first ballot Hall of Famers should be guys like Tom Brady, like Bill Belichick, like Emmitt Smith. Those are the type of guys that whoever's presenting them, the selector stands up and says, ladies and gentlemen, I present Emmitt Smith, the all-time leading rusher, and sits down. That's it. That's the presentation. That's the discussion. There is no discussion. He's in automatically. And unless you're that type of player, I think a lot of voters have decided you're not going in on a first ballot. And I think that's what happened to Antonio Gates last year. I think it's what happened to Luke Kuechly this year. And I think we're going to see it going forward. And I think next year will be very interesting for Larry Fitzgerald and for Drew Brees.
But does that make sense? I mean, at the end of the day, it's not like, Eli Manning or any of these other first ballot candidates can go back and add to their credentials. And, Ira Kaufman, I don't know if you heard this or not, but Ira Kaufman was on Mad Dog Radio, and he said, eventually Eli will get in, just not on the first ballot. But, at the end of the day, the busts don't say, hey, this guy got in on the 13th ballot, this guy got in on the first ballot. So why does it really matter that much?
Yeah, there's 2 schools of thought on that. Some people are adamant that first ballot Deion Sanders is one, and people have listened to him, that first ballot is first ballot, and there should be, a first ballot wing at the Hall of Fame, that these guys were the most special guys who ever played the game. And then there's other people who say, hey, you vote for the best people. So when you get to that 7, that you vote for the best 5 people. And that's how it's changed. I don't know if I fully explained that, but in the past, we got to the final 5, we voted yes or no, and that was it. So now this year, you get to the final 7, and you vote for 5 of those, and whatever number of those 5 that get 80% get into the Hall of Fame, which was the 3. And so, I don't know where I stand on that. I kind of just look at the list and vote for who I think the top 5 are. And that's the way I think it should be done. And if you think that first ballot guy is one of the best 5, then he's going to get in as a first ballot. And if he doesn't, then he won't.
Hey, Giant fans, as a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5 o'clock. Your business is always on your mind, which means that when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Adding the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture doubles your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Again, that's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, now I want to ask you specifically about Eli, and obviously, you can disclose what you want and what you think about it, but there was a lot of debate from what I understand about Eli's candidacy. I had heard that it had gone over almost 40 minutes, maybe a little bit longer and stuff like that. From your perspective, where do you think the sticking point was with Eli's overall candidacy? And do you think maybe as the years go on, those who maybe, and I know I'm asking you to kind of speak for everybody else, and I don't mean to, but do you think maybe the opinions will soften on what elements of his career maybe kept them out?
Well, I think things that you look for, or the Pro Bowls don't, I mean, there's 100 Pro Bowlers every year. I mean, we're up to that, look at the quarterbacks who were in the Pro Bowl this year in the AFC and how many quarterbacks were passed over. I think we got down to the fifth alternate, maybe the sixth alternate, the fact that Drake May went. So you don't necessarily look at Pro Bowls anymore for how many a guy has, but the only thing you consider off that is if they don't have a lot, because there are so many who are Pro Bowls. And the fact that Eli Manning made only 4 Pro Bowls in 16 seasons, I think stands out. The fact that he wasn't an all-pro at all. He never got a single MVP vote in the regular season. He never made the all-decade team. And these are the things that you look for. And if you look on Pro Football Reference, that's what they weigh heavily, is those things right there. Not the Pro Bowls, but the other stuff. That's what they weigh in setting the marks that they said. How he's based on all these things. He's, I'm just making up a number, but a guy, not necessarily Eli, is 67th, among his position all time, or 12th or whatever. And the average for the Hall of Famer is this number. And I think they do a very good job with that. So those are kind of the things that you look at, because especially all decade means that he was one of the best in his era at his position. And so I think all those things have played into it. Giants fan knows he never led the NFL in touchdowns, but led in interceptions 3 times. His career record is 117, which some people tell you that quarterbacks should not be judged by their career record. And if you take out his last few years, he's got a winning record in the NFL. His career passer rating is 84.1, and it's 60th on the all-time list. But how much do you weigh that against the plays that he made in the fourth quarter of 2 Super Bowls in 2007, 2011, earning MVP in both of those years that got his team Super Bowl wins? How do you weigh those two things? And I think that's where voters are. And some voters would tell you that's enough. Him winning the 2 Super Bowls and making the plays that won the Super Bowls, becoming the Super Bowl MVP, that's enough. There are other voters who will tell you, no, he has none of these other things we look for. And so he's not, if he's not a Hall of Famer because he doesn't have all the other stuff that goes with it. So that's where we are with him right now. Does he one day go in? I would say yes. At some point, I think he does go in. Is it next year? I don't know. The year after? I don't know. But I do think at some point, Eli Manning will be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Now, what's going to be interesting to me, I think, is next year, Philip Rivers becomes eligible for the Hall of Fame. Philip Rivers has great numbers. He has some of the things we talked about. He doesn't have the MVP. He has some of the things that we talked about that Eli doesn't have, but he never won a Super Bowl. He didn't make the 2 plays to have the 2 fourth quarters that Eli had to win his team Super Bowls and win Super Bowl MVP. He never played in a Super Bowl. So now you've got Eli, now you got Philip Rivers. You were talking about the backlog. Maybe we get this backlog of quarterbacks all of a sudden. It's Ben Roethlisberger coming up, and how do you separate all these guys? And we very well, the backlog that we have at receivers, we could see this at quarterback going forward. There's no question about that, since Eli didn't get in this year.
What about, when these discussions go on? I mean, I'm sure this comes up. You'll hear, oh, Dan Marino never won a Super Bowl. He was in the Super Bowl, but I believe they got blown out, if I recall. You hear Eli Manning is one of 6 guys, I believe, who have won 2 Super Bowls, 2 Super Bowl MVPs. I mean, when you go back and forth like that, I mean, how much does the past weigh on, do you think, the present voting, the present consideration, when you're trying to compare guys from maybe different eras and what they've accomplished?
Yeah, it's difficult, especially the receiver position, to compare eras, but I think it's difficult at the quarterback position too. I mean, when you look at Eli's passing statistics, 57,000 yards and 366 passing touchdowns, and where those rank, they're in the top 10 all time. So he put up some great numbers. And I think you also have to consider that when you consider his case, that he did put up some really great numbers. And he played an awfully long time, and he had a streak of always being in the lineup for the Giants. I think you have to take all of that into consideration. So, the discussion on him next year, I think, will be even more interesting to see how people feel. Have they softened their stance a little bit because he's not, sort of like the Terrell Owens thing. He had to wait 3 years, and he waited 3 years. Antonio Gates had to wait 1 year, and he waited 1 year. Like, how long is Eli's wait going to be, and what's the discussion going to be like next year? Is it going to have softened, and is it going to be a different discussion, or is it going to be the same discussion that we had this year of some people pointing out that he didn't do a whole lot in the 16 regular seasons, but he did a ton in the Super Bowl, as others point out, and that should be enough. And so I think that's going to be an even more interesting discussion than what we had this year.
Now, I don't know if there's a set of rules you have to follow as far as when you do this evaluation. Do the committee members have to go back and look at maybe historical film, or do they basically go off the numbers, or how exactly does that work?
Well, you have the presentation that and I'll say this, Bob Glauber had a great presentation for Eli Manning. It is not his fault that Eli Manning did not make a lot of times, fans of that team, fans of that player want to blame the selector who presented, the player who's up, whose candidacy is up. And I had Darren Woodson this year, and I'm devastated that Darren Woodson didn't get in. He's in his 17th year of eligibility, and I thought he had a really good case, and he didn't get in, and I'm devastated. But I think I did everything I could to get Darren Woodson into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and I think Bob Glauber did everything he could possibly do to get Eli Manning into the Hall of Fame. And so you do the best you can, and you try to find other ways and other stats and other things to support, the candidacy of whoever you're presenting. So I'm sure Bob will do that this offseason, evaluate what was said, evaluate the feedback that he got in the room, and say, okay, now what I can take all that. Now how does my presentation next year, if he's the one presenting him, have to be different? What do I have to do to convince these voters that he can get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame? How can I change their minds of those who are adamant that he's not a Hall of Famer? And so, that's how I think it works for presenters. And, I've been in contact, for instance, today with Darren Woodson and say, hey, let's have a Zoom call in a week or two and discuss maybe how we can change the minds of, and he says, hey, look, I don't know how the process works. I'd like to just talk about the process and all of that. And so I think that's what Bob will probably do with Eli's case, and probably come back with something different next year to present that, maybe is more compelling than anything, having gotten the feedback, more compelling than what he presented this year. But he did a great job, and it's not his fault that Eli didn't get in.
Right. The reason why I ask is because, as you know, stats don't tell the whole story. Darren Woodson, you saw him for a number of years covering the Cowboys. You saw, the little things that don't show up in the stat book. That's why I wondered if, was film involved, or was it just, here's the presentation, here are the numbers, and now you make up your mind.
Yeah, I think it's just here are the numbers and you make up your mind. Now, Cowboys sent out a video that they had done on Darren Woodson's case, and I don't know if people watch that or not. Actually, anything that they send out, whether it's the teams that send it out, or the presenter that sends it out, or another selector that sends it out, or somebody just in the public who sends it out, I will always watch that out of respect. I will always watch it, read it, whatever it is, and send a thank you note. Hey, watched it, read it, saw it, whatever, and appreciate you sending that. That's probably all I'll say, but I do. I appreciate people sending things and being involved in the process and wanting their candidates to go into the Hall of Fame. I get it, and so I will watch some of that, and the case of Maxie Bond, played so long ago. I did watch some film of Maxie Bond and was up on his case, and so yeah, it kind of depends too if you've watched the candidate his entire career or not, some of those older guys who maybe I didn't see, I do try to go back and read more stories on them and watch some film of games that they played and stuff. But the more modern type guys, not as much, because I saw, most of their games, most of their great plays. And of course, Eli, you saw what he did in the Super Bowls, which was fantastic. I mean, you can't do better than that. The plays that he made in the fourth quarter of those games to win Super Bowl MVP. It doesn't get any better than that.
Hey, Giant fans, when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. And there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game so that even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets in a same-game parlay. The app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if their first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Hey, Giant fans, if you're looking to join an exclusive community of Big Blue Faithful where you can discuss the team and receive inside information in a toxic-free environment, then you need to check out the Locked On Giants Blue Crew community. Members get access to our exclusive, by invitation only Discord channel where we can talk with one another, ask questions, get breaking news, and so much more. Plus, as part of the Locked On Giants Blue Crew, I text exclusive updates and info directly to your phone, and you can communicate with me one-on-one via text. So come on and see what it's all about with a free 14-day trial. And when you use our promo code BLUECREW, you will get your first 2 months after your 14-day trial ends at a 50% discount off the regular monthly price of just $4.99. If you don't like the service, cancel before your free trial ends, and you'll owe absolutely nothing. For more information or to register, visit joinsubtext.com/LockedOnNYGiants. And don't forget to enter that promo code at the top of the screen. That's BlueCrew, BLUECREW, to get your 2-month discount once your free 14-day trial ends. Text and data rates may apply. Please see your carrier's plan for details. The Hall of Fame voting process has been around for, I think, since the 60s. That being said, it continues to evolve. I'm sure the committee members get together and they say, okay, what can we do moving forward to further evolve the process? Has that discussion taken place? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it's not up to us. We don't set the voting procedures. The Hall of Fame does that. They have a board of, I think it's a board of selectors or a board of something. Anyway, they have a board. Jerry Jones was on the board. I don't know if he still is, but people like that are on their board, and they're the ones who decide with input from the Hall of Fame staff, and sometimes with input from us. But this particular case, when they changed the rules for this year, it was input from the Hall of Famers. It was input from Deion Sanders and from other Hall of Famers who wanted to be part of the process and who wanted to make it more exclusive. And they've done that. So they may go back to them and say, is this working? Is this not working? Because I don't think there's any set date. They didn't put in a timeline of how long it can go like this, and they can change it at any point they want to change it. I'm fairly certain. So, do they review it after this year? I don't know. I imagine this is what they wanted. So I imagine the 4 candidates, the 4 inductees, I'm betting that they're very happy that they got that number of 4. And after the Hall of Fame ceremony in August, I imagine that they will revisit things and see where they are and make sure they like it as it is. But that's completely up to them, and they tell us how we're going to vote and how things are going to be done. And there was a lot of confusion from inside the selection committee, outside the selection committee, exactly how this was going to be done this year. But they did get what they wanted with a much smaller class, made it a much more exclusive thing than what it has been with 7 or 8 going in. With just 4 going in, it is very exclusive. There's no question about that.
And then my final question, just to go back to Eli for a moment, having heard this extensive presentation from Bob Glauber, and I understand Gary Myers also contributed a little bit to it. I mean, you guys, I know Bob will probably change it up and whatnot, but it kind of sounds to me, at least based on what I was following on Twitter, that people just have their mind made up. It's like, no Eli, yes Eli, or whatever. Realistically speaking, have you seen a lot of instances over the years that you've been on the committee where maybe initially the committee was lukewarm or a flat out no against the candidate, and they've softened and they let guys in, and, after hearing the same presentation over and over?
Yeah, I think Eric Allen is a perfect example of that, and the case was made. This is last year, and he's going to be in the seniors candidate, in the senior pool if he doesn't get in. And I went in the meeting thinking Eric Allen had no chance to go in, and then you see that momentum build, and people say, "Yeah, we've overlooked Eric Allen for a really long time." Ralph Wilson was another one, former late owner of the Buffalo Bills. Way back when, was one that surprised me. Like, I thought that was back when owners actually went in with modern era players. Like, they were part of that process. There was no separate category, and he was in with modern era players. And all of a sudden you see this momentum build. I mean, yeah, I think he should go in. And then, people making a case for him and other people talking, and it swayed the entire room. And I saw that with him. So there've been many examples of it. I think Eric Allen is the latest. And I was really surprised. I would have told, if I'd bet before the selection meeting that Eric Allen was going to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, I would have bet no. And I probably would have bet a paycheck on that. And then you could tell in the room, I mean, there was enough momentum. I'm like, he's going in the Hall of Fame this year. Like, you could just tell he was going into the Hall of Fame. There was enough momentum for him, building. So yes, I think minds can be changed in the meeting when you start breaking everything down and comparing, one guy to another guy to another guy. Yes, I think minds can be changed in that meeting with things that are said.
Well, I know Giant fans are hoping that Eli eventually gets in. The competition is going to be stiff. You mentioned Roethlisberger, you mentioned Rivers, Drew Brees, and I think Rivers are next year. Then you have Roethlisberger the year after. Brady, I think, is the year in 30, if I'm not mistaken, or 29. And then if Aaron Rodgers calls it a career, he's going to be up in 30. So you are going to have quite a bit of a backlog there. But what is it, 19 years or 20 years that a guy before he becomes a senior?
He has 19 years, which was Eric Allen this year. And then on the 20th year, he becomes a 20th year of eligibility. He goes into the seniors pool. So like now with Darren Woodson, he just finished 17th. So next year, so he's got 2 more years in modern era, and then he'll go into the seniors pool. So yeah, and you talk about that backlog of possibly a quarterback. You look where we are with coaches right now, and the fact that Mike Holmgren didn't make it. So now you've got Belichick is eligible next year, and then after Belichick, you have Mike Shanahan. I assume Bill Belichick will be first out, unless people think, oh, he's going back, I'm not going to vote for him because he's going back into the, NFL at some point. Which again, you can't. To me, he's a first out Hall of Famer regardless. But Joe Gibbs came back when he was a Hall of Famer and coach. But you look at, you've got Joe Gibbs, you got Tom Coughlin. You got Bill Belichick, you got Tom Coughlin, you got Mike Shanahan. Andy Reid's probably going to retire at some point, and it's only a year waiting period for coaches. When is Mike Holmgren going to get another chance to come back around for the Pro Football Hall of Fame? It may be a while, and I know he's probably devastated that he didn't get in, and know that it might be 5, 6, 7 years before he gets another chance to go back in. And so I will say, at least for Eli, it's going to be a yearly thing. He's going to be on that 15 every single year moving forward. Now it's just a case of him making those cuts to get to that 7 where you're voting on the 5 and have enough of the 80% support. Or again, if they change the rules at some point and it's a yes or no vote, which makes it far easier to go in.
Maybe. I mean, that would certainly, the percentages and stuff like that, that number could be so skewed, I think. But listen, this was very enlightening. I do appreciate all the feedback. I appreciate your time. I know you've had a busy week, and certainly, it's always a pleasure to talk to you when I can. So thank you for coming on the pod, explaining some of this stuff, breaking some of this stuff down. And I hope to maybe down the line have you on again if you're willing. And Giant fans, I want to thank you for tuning in. She's Charean Williams. You can find her on NBC Sports Pro Football Talk. Does a great job, and she's just a tremendous individual who I admire greatly. So thank you for tuning in, spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And Giant fans, we'll see you tomorrow.